moment my daughter looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong in my own home, something inside me snapped. Honor, sacrifice, justice. I built that house with my bare hands, and she tried to erase me from it. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from in the comments. I still remember the salt in the air and the hum of my truck as I left the highway. 2 hours from the city, I thought I was finally free. The Sea House wasn't just bricks and timber, it was my sanctuary. The place Evelyn and I had built with our own hands, every nail hammered during long weekends, every plank chosen after endless debates. It was her laughter woven into the walls, her fingerprints on every choice. I had kept it alive after she was gone because it was all I had left of her. That house was memory, love, grief, and hope, all in one. But the second my tires rolled onto the gravel driveway, I knew something was wrong. A black SUV sat there, polished, arrogant, parked exactly where Evelyn's blue sedan used to be. For a moment, I told myself maybe a neighbor stopped by. Maybe I was imagining the voices drifting through the balcony doors. Then I heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter. Laura's. My daughter's. I froze, hand tight on the steering wheel, heart pounding harder than it had in years. I killed the engine, climbed out, and stood there, bag in hand, staring up at the balcony. My daughter leaned against the railing, sunlight catching her hair just the way Evelyn's used to. For 1 second, it softened me. And then I saw him. David, my son-in-law. Standing behind her, coffee mug in hand, shifting like a man who knew he didn't belong. I walked inside. The door wasn't even locked. My house. Open, as if it already belonged to someone else. Laura looked at me like I was intruding. Not with surprise, not with guilt, but with a cold dismissal that cut deeper than any words. Dad, you're not supposed to be here. I dropped my bag. Not supposed to? Laura, what are you talking about? This is my home. Her voice sharpened, every syllable deliberate. Not anymore. David's parents need it. They'll be moving in soon. You don't need a place like this. You should let go. For the briefest second, her voice trembled, eyes darting away as though she wasn't fully convinced herself. But then she straightened, hardening her tone, hiding that flicker of doubt under a mask of cold resolve. The room spun. I blinked hard, convinced I'd misheard. This house was bought with 3 decades of 12-hour days. I'd built half the marina to pay for this place. Evelyn and I had picked every tile, every piece of furniture, dreaming of years we'd never get to live. And my daughter, my only child, was giving it away like an unwanted hand-me-down. I forced myself to speak calmly. Laura, this house belongs to me. The deed. I don't care about the deed, she snapped, slamming her mug onto the counter. We're here now, and you can't stay. You should leave. Every word hit me like a hammer. Leave? From my own home? I tried again, softer this time, almost pleading. Honey, I just wanted a weekend. 2 days by the water. That's all. Her eyes narrowed. You're just in the way. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. In the way. The phrase lodged itself inside my chest. I looked at her, really looked. The same girl who once curled up in my lap when thunderstorms rattled the roof. The girl who begged me to read her the same bedtime story 10 times in a row. The girl who clung to me at Evelyn's funeral, sobbing into my shirt, whispering, "Don't leave me too, Dad." That girl was gone. Now, she stood in Evelyn's kitchen, wearing Evelyn's robe, throwing me out of the house Evelyn and I built. I whispered, "I drove 2 hours to get here." "Then drive 2 hours back," she shot back, louder, sharper. This isn't your place anymore." David shifted, embarrassed, eyes fixed on the floor. He opened his mouth, maybe to defend me, but Laura silenced him with a wave of her hand. She always did that, commanded him like a soldier. I bent down to pick up my bag, my knees aching, my hands shaking. 62 years old, and my only child looked at me like dirt clinging to her shoe. "Fine," I said. "Just one word. It tasted like ash." Laura smirked. "Good. Next time, call first. Call first. To use my own property." I walked out, each step heavier than the last. Behind me, their voices blurred together. Laughter again. Plans for dinner. My name not even part of the conversation. I opened the truck, slid behind the wheel, and gripped it so tight my knuckles turned white. Through the rearview mirror, I saw them raise their glasses on the balcony. Laura lifted her mug like a toast, her eyes locking with mine for a split second. It wasn't a toast. It was a goodbye. The road back stretched endlessly before me. I drove in silence, headlights carving through the darkness, every mile carrying me farther from the life I thought I had. By the time the city skyline appeared, I wasn't just a man who had lost his house. I was a father who had lost his daughter. But here's the twist. Betrayal doesn't end with surrender. It breeds something else. A fire. By the time I pulled into my driveway, that fire had already started to burn. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I sat alone in my apartment that night, the city humming faintly outside my window, but inside everything was hollow. My coffee had gone cold. The television was on but silent, and I just sat there replaying her voice over and over. "You don't need this house. You're just in the way." Those words didn't just hurt. They rewrote every memory I thought I still had with my daughter. I used to think grief had broken me after Evelyn died. Turns out, grief was just the opening act. What really broke me was realizing my daughter, the child I raised with my own hands, no longer saw me as a father, but as an obstacle. But maybe I should have seen it coming. Because the truth is, this wasn't the first time Laura had taken something from me. It was just the biggest. It had been building quietly, like cracks in a wall you ignore until one day the whole house collapses. It started small. After Evelyn's funeral, Laura called me every night. I answered every time, clinging to the sound of her voice like a lifeline. Then came the first request. "Dad, my rent is too high. Can you help?" Of course, I wrote the check. A few weeks later, it was her car breaking down. "Dad, I need reliable transportation. David can't get to work without it." I bought them a brand new SUV, the kind I'd never even bought for myself. I told myself this was love. This was my way of keeping her close. But soon, the requests grew sharper. Tuition for grad school, wedding expenses, a loan for David's new business venture. $40,000 vanished without so much as a thank you. Every time I gave in, she seemed to grow colder. There was one night, 8 months after Evelyn passed, when Laura came over for dinner. I had cooked Evelyn's old recipes, trying to recreate the warmth of family. She barely touched her food, scrolling through her phone, sighing as though my attempts at conversation were interruptions. Then, halfway through dessert, she leaned back and said casually, "Dad, you should think about selling that beach house. It's too much for you to manage alone. The money could help us get settled." Settled? That word cut deeper than the knife in my hand. Settled for who? For her? For David? For me, the house wasn't a burden. It was all I had left. I laughed it off that night, told her she was being ridiculous. But now, standing in that kitchen weeks later, hearing her declare it as fact, I realized she hadn't been joking. She'd been laying the groundwork all along. The truth slammed into me like a wave. Every check I'd written, every demand I'd met, every silence I'd swallowed had trained her. Trained her to believe that I was a resource, not a father. That my love was measured in dollars, not in years of sacrifice. I had been teaching her the wrong lesson, and now the student had surpassed the teacher. I stared at Evelyn's picture on the mantel, her smile frozen in time. She had been the strong one, the one who never let Laura get away with her tantrums. I was the soft one, the buffer, the one who said yes to keep the peace. When Evelyn died, that balance vanished, and in my grief, I mistook surrender for compassion. But compassion doesn't look like this. Compassion doesn't empty your bank account, strip you of your dignity, and finally demand your home. This wasn't grief anymore. This was greed. And yet, even with anger boiling in my chest, I couldn't shake the memories. Laura, age 6, tugging at my sleeve to take her to the beach. Laura, age 13, sitting beside me in the stands, cheering for the Padres. Laura, age 20, sobbing on my shoulder after a breakup. Every version of her still lived inside me. That was the cruelest part. Because those memories were real, and so was this betrayal. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. I hadn't moved in hours. My knees stiff, my hands trembling, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. For 3 years, I had been a shell of the man I once was. Evelyn's death had gutted me, and Laura had taken advantage of that hollow space. But that night, something shifted. The old Michael, the builder, the fighter, the negotiator, was waking up again. I thought about the deals I'd survived in my career, rivals who tried to bankrupt me, clients who tried to cheat me, partners who tried to cut me out. I'd beaten them all because I knew how to play the long game. You let them think they've won, let them lean into their arrogance, and then you strike when they're most certain of victory. Laura thought she'd broken me. She thought her betrayal would leave me too paralyzed to act. She thought she could rip the heart out of my chest, and I'd just stumble away in silence. But she forgot something. She forgot I was the man who built everything she's ever had. She forgot I was the man Evelyn trusted to protect this family. She forgot that I still knew how to fight. And as I sat there in the dark, Evelyn's voice echoed in my head, clearer than ever. Don't let kindness become weakness. For 3 years, I had been weak. But weakness had an expiration date. Tonight, it ended. I picked up my phone, stared at Laura's name in the call history, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to dial. Instead, I opened my laptop, the screen glowing in the dim room, and began to search. Property law, ownership rights, legal defenses. My fingers flew over the keys like they used to over blueprints. Every page I read, every clause I studied, felt like armor sliding back into place. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about reclaiming something I had lost long before Laura tried to steal my house, my will, my strength, my voice. By dawn, the decision was sealed. No more begging, no more surrender, no more checks written out of guilt. Laura had drawn the battle line when she told me to leave. Now it was my turn. And when I made my move, she wouldn't just see her father. She would see the man she underestimated, the man she thought grief had broken, the man who had once terrified business rivals with nothing more than patience and strategy. Laura thought she'd taken my house. What she didn't know was that she had given me back something far more dangerous. She had given me back myself. The morning after that decision, I walked into Marcus Reed's office like a man who had remembered how to breathe again. Marcus had been my attorney for years, sharp, unflinching, a man who never wasted words. His office overlooked the harbor, sailboats gliding across the water, the kind of calm that mocked the storm inside me. He rose, shook my hand, and asked, "What's the situation?" I didn't sugarcoat it. "My daughter is trying to steal my house." He froze for just a moment, eyebrows lifting, then pulled out a legal pad. "Tell me everything." I laid it out. Laura's words, David's silence, the declaration that my house now belonged to his parents. Marcus's pen scratched across the page with surgical precision. When I finished, he set the pen down and leaned back. "She has no legal claim," he said. "The deed is clear. Your ownership is solid. But Michael, this isn't just about law. Family disputes get messy. If she's willing to lie to you, she might try to manipulate others. We'll make your ownership bulletproof. Trusts, LLC structures, protection layers so deep she couldn't touch it even if she tried." I nodded. The law was my shield. But a shield alone wasn't enough. Laura hadn't come at me with paperwork. She'd come at me with betrayal, arrogance, and psychological warfare. I needed more than defense. I needed a strike she wouldn't forget. That's when I thought of Henry Collins. Henry was an old friend, a retired security systems engineer who lived 3 blocks from me. He was the kind of man who could make an entire house sing on command. A genius, eccentric, the kind of mind people underestimated until they saw what he could do. Years ago, I'd helped him with a flooded basement, and he'd once said, "If you ever need payback for something, call me. I'll turn your enemy's house into a nightmare." I had laughed then. I wasn't laughing now. That afternoon, I knocked on his workshop door. The place smelled of solder and coffee, wires snaking across every surface, screens glowing with code. Henry looked up from a half-built drone, grinning when he saw me. "Michael, what brings you here?" I told him everything. His grin widened into something feral. "So you want to teach them a lesson?" "I want them to understand that some things are not theirs to take," I said. He tapped his desk, eyes gleaming. "Then we don't just lock the doors. We make the house fight back." For the next week, we worked like madmen. Henry's workshop became our war room. We designed not just a security system, but an experience, a performance, a storm made of wires and code, motion sensors under the floorboards so the house knew where they moved, LED lights hidden in corners, capable of strobes that would disorient anyone inside, surround sound speakers, whispering in the dark, footsteps echoing in empty halls, projectors that would cast shadows moving across the walls, shadows that weren't really there. And then Henry added his masterpiece, mechanical releases hidden in the ceilings, triggered by sensors, dropping folded notes onto tables or floors. Notes written in Evelyn's handwriting, phrases copied from her journals, words she had once spoken in moments of fierce love. A daughter's love should protect, not destroy. A family that forgets respect, forgets itself. The first time one of those notes fluttered down in testing, even I shivered. Henry chuckled. "Psychology, Michael. People can fight noises. They can explain away lights. But a message in handwriting they recognize? That breaks them." We installed hidden cameras, all routed to my laptop, so I could watch everything from miles away. Henry even rigged a control system on my phone, one button to unleash the sequence. By the 4th day, the house was ready. It looked normal, peaceful, even inviting. But underneath, it was alive, waiting. And yet, that wasn't enough for me. I wanted a final twist, something that would not just scare them, but humiliate them. So I called Marcus again. "How fast can we transfer ownership of the house into a charitable trust?" He paused. "You want to give it away?" Not give it away. Protect it. Make sure no matter what Laura tries, she'll never touch it. I'll keep lifetime rights, but when I'm gone, it goes to kids who actually need a home." Marcus's silence stretched. Then he said, "I can have the paperwork ready by Monday." Perfect. Now the plan had two blades. First, the house itself would show Laura and David exactly what it meant to cross me. It would strip away their arrogance, leave them shaking, expose their greed under the weight of fear. And when they crawled back, demanding what they thought was theirs, I'd show them the papers. Not theirs. Never theirs. Gone forever. I sat in Henry's workshop that final night, watching him solder wires with the precision of a surgeon. "You know," he said without looking up, "this isn't just about the house. This is about you. About getting your spine back." I didn't answer at first, but he was right. Laura thought she had taken my power, reduced me to a weak, grieving old man. What she didn't realize was that by trying to strip me of everything, she had given me the one thing I had been missing since Evelyn's death: my will to fight. Henry looked up, handing me the control tablet. "You ready?" I stared at the screen, the buttons glowing softly, the cameras showing empty rooms bathed in peaceful silence. The house looked like it always had, quiet, serene, waiting, but I knew better. It was a trap, a masterpiece of fear disguised as comfort. I closed my fist around the tablet. "I'm ready." And I meant it. Not just for the house. Not just for Laura. For me. For Evelyn. For every piece of myself I'd buried under years of grief and surrender. The stage was set. The actors didn't know their roles yet. But soon, they would. And when the curtain rose, it wouldn't just be a house they faced. It would be me, the father they thought they could break, standing taller than ever. They arrived just after 2 in the afternoon, right on cue, like actors stepping onto a stage they didn't know had been set for them. I watched them through the live feeds on my laptop, every camera angle clear as glass. The black rental van crunched over the gravel, doors opening with the cheerful confidence of conquerors. Laura stepped out first, sunglasses perched on her head, voice bright and triumphant. David followed with that half-nervous, half-smug grin I'd come to despise. Behind them, Martha and Greg, the parents who thought my house would solve all their problems, shuffled out, gazing up at the home with wide-eyed wonder. "This is it," Laura announced, sweeping her arm dramatically toward the house like a queen showing off her castle. My house. My Evelyn's house. I leaned closer to the screen. Every detail burned into me. Martha's purse stuffed with folded clothes, Greg's careful grip on a suitcase, Laura's laugh as she dug for the key I had once trusted her with. They were moving in like they had every right, like I had already been erased. But they hadn't read the sign. Henry's placard gleamed by the front door. "Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk." Martha wrinkled her nose. "What on earth is this nonsense?" Greg chuckled. "Probably some local prank. Ignore it." Laura rolled her eyes. "Dad must have put that up. He thinks he's clever. It's nothing. Come on, let's get inside." With a flourish, she slid the key into the lock and opened the door as though she owned it. The 4 of them marched in, their voices echoing through the entryway. I tapped my phone, arming the sequence. The house was listening now, watching, waiting. At first, I let them relax. They wandered through the living room, Martha gasping at the view, Laura pointing out bedrooms like a real estate agent. "This one's perfect for you two," she told David's parents, patting the doorframe. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. They were assigning rooms in my house like they were already unpacked. Then David popped open a bottle of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. That was the moment. I pressed the first button. The lights flickered, just once, barely noticeable. Greg looked up at the ceiling. Old wiring? No, Martha muttered. That was strange. Laura laughed too loudly. It's fine. It's just Dad being dramatic. He probably messed with the lights before he left. The system waited, just as Henry had programmed it. And then, with surgical timing, the kitchen faucet exploded to life, spraying water against the sink, hissing and splattering in the silence. David set down his glass. Okay, that's not normal. I pressed the second button. The living room went dark. A low hum began, vibrating through the floorboards, and then a voice filled the air. Cold, mechanical, inescapable. Unauthorized presence detected. You do not belong here, Martha screamed. Greg grabbed her arm. David spun in a circle, searching for speakers he couldn't see. Laura's laugh faltered. It's just some system Dad set up. Stop panicking. But her voice wavered. Shadows bloomed across the walls, flickering figures that moved without bodies. Henry's projectors painted human silhouettes that shifted just out of sync with the family's movements. One shadow stretched tall across the wall behind Laura, its hand lifting as if reaching for her shoulder. She whipped around, gasping. Nothing. I activated the third sequence. A folded note dropped silently onto the coffee table. Laura picked it up with trembling fingers. The handwriting was unmistakable. Evelyn's looping script. A daughter's love should protect, not destroy. Laura's face drained of color. For a heartbeat, her lips quivered as if she might cry, the child in her breaking through. But she clenched her jaw, forcing the tears back, and spat, "This is fake! This is Mom's!" David snatched it from her, reading quickly, his eyes narrowing. "This is a trick. He forged it." Martha shook her head violently. "No, that's her writing. I saw her letters. I know that hand." The whispers began then. Soft at first, barely audible. "Leave. Leave now. Leave while you can." The whispers circled them, overlapping, coming from every direction. Laura clapped her hands over her ears. "Stop it! Stop it!" David lunged toward the breaker box. "I'll shut it down." He ripped it open, yanked at the switches, everyone already dead. He swore under his breath. "It's running on backup. This is insane." Another note dropped in front of Martha. She bent down slowly, shaking, and opened it. Her lips moved silently as she read, "A family that forgets respect, forgets itself." She dropped it like it burned. "This house is cursed," she whispered. I pressed again. The strobe lights fired, red and white flashing in rapid bursts, disorienting them until they staggered like drunks. The whispers grew louder, overlapping with footsteps that pounded through the empty upstairs hall, creaks echoing down the staircase. Greg clutched his chest, gasping. Martha sobbed uncontrollably. David was yelling, but the sound drowned in the chaos. And Laura, my daughter, spun in circles, her face twisted with disbelief and terror. The same woman who told me I didn't belong here now screamed at shadows in the home she claimed as hers. I watched her crumble. I wanted it burned into her memory forever. For hours, I let the system cycle through its horrors. Lights, shadows, water blasting from showers, voices booming warnings. Each time they tried to catch their breath, another wave hit them. Each time they thought it was over, another note dropped. By 3 a.m, they were broken, huddled together in the living room like cornered prey. Finally, as dawn streaked the horizon, I released the locks. The front door clicked. David lunged for it, yanking it open, and the 4 of them bolted into the cold morning air. Bags abandoned, glasses shattered, dignity left behind. From my chair 200 miles away, I watched through the camera as Laura stumbled across the gravel, barefoot, mascara streaking her face. Martha sobbed against Greg's shoulder. David cursed under his breath, pulling them toward the van. They didn't even look back. I closed the laptop slowly, breathing steady, calm. No triumph, no laughter, just quiet certainty. They had walked into my house as conquerors. They left as fugitives. And the best part, they thought the house had beaten them. They had no idea it was me. By Monday morning, I knew it was time to end this war. I had let the house do the teaching. Now it was my turn to deliver the final blow. Marcus had the paperwork ready, every page crisp, every line unshakable. The villa was no longer mine to give, no longer Laura's to steal. It was bound to a foundation that would shelter children who had no parents to protect them. That irony alone, the house built from my sacrifice, now protecting kids abandoned by family, was almost poetic. At 10 sharp, the door to Marcus's conference room burst open. Laura stormed in first, fury written across her face. David trailed close behind, his jaw tight, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. And then came Martha and Greg, shuffling in like survivors of some disaster, still pale from the nightmare they'd endured. Laura slammed her palms on the table. "Enough, Dad. This ends today. You sign the transfer. Right now." I didn't flinch. I slid the folder toward her. "You're too late." She froze, eyes darting down to the documents. Her voice cracked. "What is this?" Marcus's voice was calm, clinical. "Mr. Lawson transferred ownership of the property to the Horizon Foundation for Children this morning. The transfer is complete and irrevocable. He retains lifetime use, but upon his passing, the house becomes property of the foundation." The color drained from Laura's face. David leaned forward, snatching the papers, scanning them with shaking hands. No, this is some trick. You can't just—" "I can," I cut in. "And I did. You wanted to take it from me. Instead, I gave it to children who actually need it. You get nothing." Martha let out a strangled sob. But we thought—" "You thought wrong," I said coldly. "You don't get to plan your lives around stealing from me. Not anymore." Laura shot to her feet, her chair screeching across the floor. "You did this just to spite me, to humiliate us." I met her gaze without blinking. "No, I did it to end this, to make sure you can never try again, to remind you that your father is not a man to be erased." For a moment, the room was silent except for Laura's ragged breathing. Then she spat the words like venom. "You've destroyed our future." I leaned forward. "No, Laura. You destroyed it yourself the moment you looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong in my own home." David slammed the folder shut, his voice rising. "You're selfish. You're old and bitter, and clinging to things you don't need. We could have built a future here. Instead, you're throwing it away on strangers." I let the words hang for a beat. Then I said, "Better strangers than thieves." Martha covered her face, sobbing. Greg placed a helpless hand on her shoulder. Laura's fists trembled against the table. She had no more weapons. Every card she thought she held had turned to dust. I stood slowly, sliding the documents back toward Marcus. "We're done here." Laura's voice cracked again, but this time it was hollow. "You'll regret this." I walked to the door, pausing just long enough to deliver the final cut. "The only regret I have is how long it took me to stop letting you use me." And then I left them sitting there, broken, humiliated, powerless. That evening, I drove back to the villa. The sun was setting, gold spilling across the ocean. The house stood quiet, peaceful, untouched by the chaos of the past week. I unlocked the door, walked inside, and breathed in the silence. For the first time in years, it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. I spent the next hours dismantling Henry's system, unscrewing cameras, packing away projectors, pulling out hidden wires. The house didn't need to be a weapon anymore. It had served its purpose. Now it could return to what it was meant to be: a sanctuary. By midnight, I stood on the terrace with a cup of coffee, the waves crashing below. I set Evelyn's photograph on the table beside me, her smile lit faintly by the moonlight. "I did it," I whispered. "I finally remembered who I am." The truth hit me harder than any of Laura's words ever had. For 3 years, I had lived as though love meant surrender, as though being a good father meant letting my daughter drain me dry, strip me of my dignity, hollow me out piece by piece. But that wasn't love. That was fear. Fear of losing the last family I had left. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's weakness. And tonight, weakness was dead. The phone on the table buzzed. Laura's name lit the screen. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The war was over, and I had won. Not with anger, not with violence, but with clarity, with strength, with the one word I had been too afraid to say for years: no. The sea roared in approval, steady, unyielding, just like me. When I closed that chapter, I realized something. Family is love, yes, but love without respect is nothing but chains. Boundaries don't destroy families. They protect what's sacred. Sometimes, the most difficult word we can say to the people we love is no. But that one word can save us, can free us, can remind us of who we are. We live in a world that often confuses sacrifice with surrender. But sacrifice should never mean erasing yourself. True justice, true honor, comes when you stand tall for what matters, even if it means standing alone. If you've ever felt taken for granted, if you've ever questioned your worth inside your own family, let this story be a reminder. You are more than what people demand from you. You are what you choose to protect. Thank you for being here, for listening to my story. If it spoke to you, please subscribe, like, and share this video. And tell me in the comments, what does respect mean to you? But just as I set the phone down, it buzzed again. A message flashed across the screen. Laura's name. 3 words that cut through the silence. This isn't over. I stared at it for a long moment, then turned the phone face down. Some storms don't pass. They wait. And I was ready.